What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Soon, the age of primes will be upon us, and with it comes the end of Legacy, a toy line so vast that characters spanning the brand's entire 40-year history were brought to the forefront of an all-new mainline, and in some cases, this would be their first release since the line's inception. Noticeable entries were figures of designs from as far back as the original 80s G1 cartoon, the early 2000s Unicron Trilogy, and even briefly Beast Machines, just to name a few. The line spanned the course of roughly 3 years and created arguably some of the best generation-style Transformers seen since pre-2010. So, to celebrate its conclusion, I thought it would be only right to take a look back at this trilogy and give you guys my top 10 picks of some of the best that this toy line had to offer. But before we get stuck into that, there were some abnormal anomalies, let's say, that were released in the line's first year, which really made me question if, coming off the back of the amazing Morpher Cybertron line, Legacy was really going to be able to live up to the hype. And if you've been watching the channel over the past few years, firstly, thank you, then you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about, and it would of course have to be the Prime Universe updates. As somebody who grew up on both Bayverse and the Transformers Prime TV show, I was ecstatic to learn that some of my all-time favourite designs would be finally seeing all new updates for the first time in well over a decade. And well, let's just have my pick for the worst Transformers Legacy figure do the talking. The Deluxe Class Prime Universe RC. Man, what a disappointment. After having collected the incredible first edition figures during 2012 and being fairly impressed with the then recent Beast Wars updates from Kingdom, I really was expecting either something better or at the very least of equal quality, and unfortunately I got neither. Hasbro had, in my eyes, massacred the once so great and incredibly distinctive look of Transformers Prime RC, and instead had watered it down to the bare minimum in an attempt to G1ify it, so that, in their own words, it could better fit in with the rest of the collection. And sure, that would make sense if the same approach had been applied to the rest of the line. Instead, it really seems like this was only for the Transformers Prime figures, which even now I think is such a shame. The figure was clunky, generic, and really quite boring, and not to mention there were even some bizarre choices made for her accessories, including a front bike wheel that could detach and split open into who knows what, a frisbee, a Cybertronian waffle maker, you guys tell me. I also wasn't too big of a fan of the knee design. This had a tendency, far too often than not, to detach during posing, which made the figure even more frustrating than it already was to begin with. I will say though that she transformed into a bike that was a decent representation of how she appeared on Prime, and it was without a doubt this figure's saving grace. But even then, this couldn't deflect from what was otherwise a pretty mid-release at best. Changing gears literally by jumping into now my favourite picks, in spot number 10 I'm giving it to the G1 Universe Deluxe Class Gears, a character who was initially teased to be seeing a release during the Transformers Kingdom toy line, although it wouldn't be until a further 2 years that this grumpy minibot would make his grand return to the main line, and oh boy did it deliver. The robot mode was a fantastic, incredibly accurate recreation of the original character model that slotted in perfectly alongside some of the more recent minibot updates. The plastic was thick and the build was tough, and despite his diminutive size, he could absolutely hold his own, even featuring proper, fully functioning butterfly joints, which really do make all of the difference. Heck, the designers have even gotten so good at what they do that they've been able to cram a small yet incredibly unique feature into his chest to reenact a tiny scene where Megatron removes his grumpy disc in order to power his solar needle, which I thought was so cool. The vehicle mode is also insanely toon accurate, even sporting the now trendy cel-shaded style windows to better match what was seen on screen. The only small fault I can find with this guy, and it's one that really doesn't bother me too much, would be how the back of the vehicle is merely formed from the robot's chest plate, which, yes, whilst doesn't look the best, still isn't enough to detract from what is otherwise a right little cracker. Quaking into spot number 9 is the Prime Universe Leader Class Skyquake. Now I know for some this may come as a shock, especially after my comments regarding RC, but if Hasbro were going to G1ify these designs, then I really think this is how it should have been done. Skyquake is a great balance between both the old and the new, and whilst visually may not be as spot on as the likes of the original Voyager, I still think is overall the better toy. One of my main complaints with the original was that he was a Voyager class, meaning that he always stayed around the same height compared to the likes of Bulkhead, Starscream, and even Optimus Prime, whereas in the show, I always got the impression that he was big and definitely much beefier, something which I think this figure does a great job in capturing. Not to mention that his articulation was also a huge improvement, making poses that were once impossible now totally possible. I also really liked how this version even gave Skyquake some proper weaponry, none of that non-locking spring-loaded crap that again was first seen with the original. Even the jet mode is a straight 10/10, and much like RC is a pretty spot-on recreation to what was seen on the show. The only thing really stopping this guy from being a perfect figure would have to be how easily the wings can detach away from the back when in robot mode. This can become super annoying, although was something that they would later fix when it came round to the inevitable Dreadwing repaint. Buzzing into spot number 8 is the Animated Universe Deluxe Class Bumblebee, another beloved TV show that already previously had some pretty fantastic toys to accompany it, so I think it's safe to say that after the initial batch of Prime-inspired characters, most of us were holding our breath before getting excited about the potential of some new Transformers animated toys. But much like Skyquake, it really seems like Hasbro learned from the mistakes of the past and instead lent heavy on the original design for inspiration. Bee looks fantastic, easily recognisable as to which universe he is from, with the face sculpt being the clear highlight. One area that these updates never really tend to fail at would have to be the articulation, and this guy absolutely delivers, even featuring an ab crunch due to how he transforms to make for some incredibly dynamic poses. The vehicle mode is cute and super compact, although I definitely think it's this guy's weaker mode, as without the boosters attached, it can reveal some pretty unsightly gaps. Lighting his way into spot number 7 is the G1 Universe Deluxe Class Optimus Prime, a fairly recently released figure but by far a standout with how nostalgic the design is to the original vintage toy. Hasbro really seemed to take the idea first executed by Takara to come out with their own, way more affordable version of the missing Link Optimus Prime, and I think it absolutely delivered. Visually, this figure looks to be ripped straight out of the 80s, with his blocky proportions complete with even the iconic yellow eyes, yet in hand poses like an absolute dream. I also like how they even made some updated modifications to the design just to make it even better, such as the inclusion of a full-blown matrix of leadership complete with the actual matrix chamber. Even the truck mode is a sight for sore eyes, featuring some proper rubber tyres just for that extra nostalgic feel. There is no doubt in my mind that this was an excellent choice to release for the 40th anniversary and will hopefully be the first of many more updated G1 remakes to come. Slashing into spot number 6 is the Animated Universe Voyager Class Optimus Prime. Much like Bumblebee, a fantastic modernised update. Now don't get me wrong, those original animated figures still absolutely reign supreme from a display standpoint, although nowadays aren't really all that fun to mess with, something which again this Optimus Prime definitely improves upon. There are so many super dynamic poses that you can pull off with absolute ease when it comes to this figure, making him a treat to mess with. I also really like the added interior dashboard detail sculpted beneath Prime's windshield, something which I don't believe we've seen since the Transformers Prime First Edition version. Even the truck mode I think is an incredibly decent representation of animated Prime with a super strong and imposing front end. The only part that doesn't really look too great would have to be the back of the truck, although I do think this is something that we'll see one day perfected if and when Hasbro decide to release their own version of the wing blade design. Dominating the road and taking spot number 5 is the G1 Universe Commander Class Motormaster, which was a part of the first modern combiner since the War for Cybertron really rebooted the Generations line, and what an improvement this was in comparison to the Combiner Wars version. In robot mode, Motormaster was strictly original G1 cartoon accurate and is without a doubt the best mainline version of the character ever made. The build is a fast step up in comparison to what had came previously. The plastic is thick, dense and plentiful with little to no hollow joints when in bot mode, making him a great equivalent to stack up against the recent 86 movie Optimus Prime. But Motormaster has way more to do than to just transform into a truck, as he is also the central component to form a brand new Menasor, which this time round used the trailer as its main frame for the remaining Stunticons to just attach onto, which I know for some was a downgrade in comparison to the slightly more traditional Combiner, although I thought it resulted in something which was way more stable and considerably more enjoyable to pose. The design team must have also thought the same, as we are set to see the same engineering applied to the upcoming aerial bots. Soaring his way into spot number 4 is the Cybertron Universe Voyager class Starscream, a figure designed solely by Takara Tomy, and whilst released alongside a very strong wave of figures, is by far the best from his universe. Starscream is a near 1-to-1 compared against his character model, and is without a doubt a massive improvement to the mainline versions of the design that have come before. The articulation is fantastic, even sporting some proper intentional butterfly joints and a waist swivel, something which you don't tend to see too often from a character with a cockpit slap bang in center. He also included an array of accessories, but none more cool than the return of the Cyber Planet Key, which despite unfortunately no longer activating a spring-loaded gimmick, could still be attached onto his back to replicate what had come before. He could even transform into a jet mode of equal quality, which again looked to be ripped straight out of the Cybertron universe and packed an incredibly clean undercarriage. Commanding his way into spot number 3 would be the Emperor of Destruction, Magmatron, which to even say that is nuts. I never thought we would be seeing anything Beast Wars Neo related make its way into the mainline, especially with how so far most of the Transformers Victory figures have been solely exclusive to insanely expensive HasLabs. Magmatron's robot mode looks lethal, with an equally as devastating face card to match. The details are incredible, and again, compared to how he appeared on the show, this could easily be the Magmatron to end all Magmatrons. Despite his impressive Commander class height, he poses just as well as what you would expect from something slightly smaller, such as a Deluxe Voyager or even a Leader nowadays. And the alt modes are just crazy. And yes guys, you heard right, alt modes, as this guy doesn't just transform into one thing, it transforms into 3. There's the Landsaurus, the Skysaurus, and my personal favourite, the Seasaurus, which can then all combine into this insane Magmasaurus mode, which, as unusual as it looks, is 2 ripped straight out of the show. The only downside to these modes is that with the exception of the Landsaurus, which unfortunately packs a super underwhelming jaw range, the other 2 suffer from some pretty unsightly hollow joints, which for the price point of around $90 really should have been concealed. Serving pure beast and securing the runner-up spot had to go to the Voyager class Tarn. Had you guys told me a few years prior that in 2023 we'd be seeing IDW comic adaptations make their way into a proper mainline sold at mass retail, I would have called you crazy. But that's exactly what happened in the first wave of Legacy Evolution toys, and my goodness is Tarn a sight to behold. I remember vividly watching the Hasbro team unveil him as part of their PulseCon event, and when I tell you that my jaw was on the floor, that is no exaggeration. The robot mode is simply perfection. Maybe a little too slim in the eyes of some, but it's this athletic build that really allows you to pull off some of the most dynamic poses that I've seen from a Transformer in a long time. He could also transform into a tank that visually looked the part, although unfortunately would be the start of Hasbro starting to cut back on gimmicks such as proper rolling wheels, which even now riles me up so bad. How can you have a Transformer that turns into a tank? That just doesn't roll. But still, a fantastic figure and definitely one well worth tracking down. Which means securing the top spot and being my personal favourite figure released from the entire trilogy of Legacy had to go to the Armada Universe Commander Class Optimus Prime. A design initially teased by Takara way back in 2019, it wouldn't be for a further 4 years until he made his grand return, and my goodness was it grand. Optimus when in robot mode was a straight match to his original Armada design, and it was like they simply took the look of the previous toy and just combined that along with modern engineering, something that again I was so hoping we'd see from some of the Transformers Prime stuff. He even included some great features such as an opening matrix chamber which had not 1 but 2 fully painted and detailed layers. There were even some additional Easter eggs sculpted onto the underside of panels, such as these tiny Minicon insignias, which were just so cool. The standard truck mode was also an absolute unit, featuring some proper pinned on wheels as if the old school feels weren't already enough. but that trailer. In addition to forming a pretty decent looking battle station, this could then be transformed and fused alongside Optimus Prime to create his super mode, which was even more awesome than the core figure itself. This was big and ridiculously articulated for its scale, even featuring a waist joint, something that the regular robot mode traded off for an ab crunch instead. In all, this is just a brilliant release for both fans of the Unicron trilogy and the casual collector, and will no doubt now become the standard going forward for the Commander class price point. And that right there is a wrap 10 of my favourite toys to come from Transformers Legacy, although as a bonus for those of you who have stuck around long enough to this point, I'll also throw in my top pick for the best core class released over the past 3 years, and that would be Iguanus, a fantastic pocket-sized retake on the old G1 Pretenders concept, and a cracking figure all round. He even had a bike mode that, had it been upscaled, I think could have looked even better than the likes of the Deluxe class Prowl from the exact same toy line. I would love to get your thoughts down below. What have been some of your favourites over the past 3 years? As always, I thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Transform and roll out!